You're watching Reality Check. Tonight, the question on everyone's mind: where does India stand on the race for a vaccine for COVID-19? Now, the government has set ambitious targets of being able to give 300 million or 30 crore shots of the vaccine by August next year. But are we battle ready? Remember, India's top two contenders for the vaccine were denied permission for emergency use for now, for want of more data. Number two, we have, it appears, pre-ordered billions of doses of the vaccine, but will it be enough to cover our vast population? And finally, do we have the backbone to pull this off, from freezer trucks to last mile health workers, to be able to deliver the vaccine? All right, joining us tonight, we've got a great panel, but let me kick off with Dr. V.K. Paul, who is of course the member Niti Aayog Health, but he's also chairman of the COVID-19 task force. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. Great to have you as always. Dr. Paul, so let me just start by asking you, and of course we'll try to keep this as simple and less technical as possible, because as you know, so many people are interested in knowing what's going on, that in terms of where we stand with this whole timeline for the vaccine, the fact that you've now had both the Bharat Biotech and the Serum Institute request for emergency use at the moment at least being deferred till more data comes in, is that something we should be concerned about, and what does that do to our timelines?
Well, Vasu, before I think you go into that today, you must say it's a significant day.
Okay.
Because another indigenous vaccine candidate has now been granted clearance for clinical trials, phase 1 and phase 2 trials.
Right.
This is a DBT Genova vaccine, which is using a highly advanced and indigenously developed mRNA platform,
right,
which is being used, as you know, for Pfizer vaccine.
Right.
So this is all, it's a very, very Indian effort supported by DBT through a seed grant.
Wonderful.
And, but more interestingly, this particular vaccine is stable at normal cold chain conditions of 2 to 8 degrees. And that's something very different from that minus 70 scenario that we have faced with another
with Pfizer
mRNA. Yes.
Right. Okay.
That's the starting point. So
that's wonderful news. That's wonderful news.
So we have six vaccines in clinical trial stages in the country, which is phenomenal, and we should be all very, very proud of it. Now, you have asked a question whether to what extent are we ready? What extent our plans are. Indeed, yes, we have visualized provisionally that we would like to inoculate 30 crore individuals. And this is based on logic of preventing mortality and protecting our healthcare and pandemic control system. Essentially, we can go into the details. Now, when we look at
30 crore individuals by August, is that right? That's by August of next year.
We would say at the earliest.
At the earliest,
we think at the earliest possible, then we can move on to another group of individuals beyond this circle gradually as required. But there are, other dynamics that have to be kept in mind, namely how the pandemic would shape up.
Sure.
And also it is conditional to emerging availability of the vaccines as a stockpile or a combination of vaccines as a stockpile in the country. And we hope that such a stockpile in an optimistic scenario is a real possibility.
But let me just quickly get that clarification from you, as I asked you about the Bharat Biotech and the Serum Institute, where they were not given the green light straight away for the emergency use. They were asked to come back with more data. Is that a matter of concern, or is that
not at all?
Or that's
not
routine?
Not at all a matter of concern.
That's routine.
This is it's a stepwise process. You see, it's a stepwise process because what we are trying to do is to look at data as a rolling review, shall we say, and find a point where science and regulatory norms and SOPs are met with, and you can say, okay, here is now a situation where a regular licensure or an emergency use licensure could be given. It should not be depressing at all, and I know that the data would be coming up pretty much soon. You must know that the subjects are still on trial. And they are being watched and they are being tested, and therefore it is a matter of time only that a final decision would come. We hope that decision would be positive, and that will then unlock the program for actual vaccination of people.
Okay. But is it possible, I know these are tricky questions to answer, but would there be a rough timeline that you think by which time the first vaccine would actually be ready to be actually used?
Well, in an optimistic scenario, it is possible that such a good news, such a possibility could happen in a matter of weeks.
Weeks?
Yes, weeks, days to weeks.
Right.
We should go with that. That is in an optimistic scenario, if all things are fine.
Okay.
And we do know that we have a published data from the Oxford AstraZeneca study, and we have the same vaccine being presented by Serum for Indian licensure.
Right.
And that data is in public domain. It's peer reviewed. It shows efficacy. So I'm sure that will be taken into account, and other requirements such as immunogenicity data, etc., are being sought. They'll be provided. So we should be optimistic.
Okay. Well, that's great. Let's really hope that happens. That's wonderful if that does. Weeks, you say. The question that the question that, though, as people watch this, Dr. Paul, which we're not still very clear about, is every Indian going to get vaccinated?
Remember one very important thing, and I think the viewers should know this.
Yes.
We are moving from a zero vaccine stage, practically, to a stage where multiple vaccines would be licensed, hopefully, in a quick succession. But the total requirement will be met only when an additional and a large stockpile of those vaccines together would be available.
Sure.
Right? So in a phase when there are potentially many more potential beneficiaries, but the stockpile available globally or in any country would be small. In that situation, you exercise the option of prioritization.
Right.
And that's what exactly every country is doing it. If you look at the US, for example, they are saying we'll go like this. UK is going through 80 years, people who are living in old age homes, then health workers. So prioritization as of now in this phase of rising and slowly rising availability of vaccines is a given. And
I understand
that's
that.
the option that we are also exercising.
No, I understand that. I understand that you're saying that you want to prioritize. So first will be 30 crores, which includes frontline workers and so on. But eventually, is the idea that every Indian will be vaccinated?
Well, remember, the purpose of vaccination ultimately could be to create enough herd immunity to extinguish the pandemic. Now, that is a function of how much is the disease prevalence already taken place in the country, and how many people are still susceptible. Now, that is an evolving paradigm. But remember, the more proximal goals of vaccination are to protect the health system and to protect those who are at a high risk of mortality. And that's where you begin. After this, you pick up those who are somewhat less risk of severe morbidity, and then you move on till you think you meet the desired objectives or till the pandemic is under control and life becomes normal.
Okay, so you're saying that one shouldn't necessarily assume or think that every 1.3 billion, everyone, it's as many people as is required to either get into herd immunity, which is where a majority of the population, has immunity and that kind of insulates everyone else from getting it, or when the virus itself starts to come under control. Okay, I think that's helpful to know.
That's a journey. That's a journey, and it is evolving in a dynamic manner.
Okay, but to that end, we've already started doing some advanced booking of vaccines, and the figures are quite large. We are apparently at the moment the world's top vaccine buyer. We can in fact put that graphic up on the screen. We've apparently purchased or ordered 160 crore doses, which is just above the EU, which is 158.5 crores, US 101 crores, and so on.
The government has not ordered any vaccines as of now.
Okay.
So this must be conjecture.
This is all Duke University data. I'm sure you're aware of it.
You check with them. We have not placed any order. When that order is placed, it will be put in the public domain. As of now, there is no order placed, but we are in touch with our vaccine manufacturing units. They are partners. They are working together for playing their role as patriots, as in service of the country. So we are looking at the availability, but the critical point is to obtain the licensure and then from there move on to quick and rapid and sustained and systematic and smooth vaccination of the people on priority.
Okay, that's an interesting clarification, because this has been widely reported that we've ordered all these billions of doses. There's even a breakup of how much we've ordered from each: 100 crores from Novavax, 50 crores from Oxford University, 10 crores from Gamaleya Research Institute. So again, as I said, all Duke University. But last question to you. Do we have the backbone, because this has again been coming up time and again, we want to continue our regular immunization program, but we also want to deliver COVID. Do we have that kind of healthcare backbone to pull this off, Dr. Paul, realistically?
The answer to this is a resounding yes. We have a backbone which is built on the universal immunization program. Very recently, something like 34 crore people for children were in a campaign mode given MR vaccine over a relatively short period of time. We have spare energies. We have a spare cold chain capacity even now, which will be ramped up to meet the fullest need. Have confidence. We're building a strong IT platform. We have experience of elections. The whole nation is ready to undertake this responsibility. And it will be done. People of India will demonstrate that it can be done.
No, that's wonderful. Dr. Paul, it's great to have you. I'm going to go to panel now. I'd love for you to stay, but if you don't want to stay, that's fine too. We've got a great panel.
I'm around.
You're around. Oh, great. Okay, that's great. Okay, Professor Sudhir Krishna is also with us. He's professor at the National Center for Biological Sciences. We have Professor Bhramar Mukherjee, health data scientist, epidemiologist, and chair of biostatistics at the University of Michigan School of Public Health is with us. And also Mayur Shetty, he's CEO and product architect, Black Frog Technologies, which is a startup that's got into medical grade refrigeration systems for vaccine delivery. Great to have all of you with us. Let me just start with you, Professor Krishna, and just ask you that you heard Dr. Paul. So if I could just get you started on the first point that he spoke about, that there's this idea or perhaps expectation from people that everybody needs to be vaccinated, but as he said, that may not necessarily be required as long as the virus is under control or you're moving towards herd immunity. Do you think that's a more realistic way of looking at it?
Well, thanks for having me on your show. Well, to start with, I pretty much agree with everything that Dr. Paul said. There might be a few nuances that I would like to elaborate on, but yeah, we're in total agreement. So on this specific point too, that's right, but we can work on the details as we go along the program.
Sure. So is one of the reasons, because you feel, Dr. Krishna, we were talking about this earlier, that the virus, in the way it's manifesting itself in India, both in terms of infectivity and in terms of fatality, doesn't require that huge kind of response that we have to throw everything into now just the COVID vaccine at the neglect of other, our ongoing healthcare interventions?
So if you look at the figures per se over the course of the epidemic, we are at about 100 per million fatality rates compared, say, to the West, which is at about 1,000 per million. Right. So there's a baseline difference across. The vulnerability groups are also quite different. But if you look at something like Karnataka, the fatality rates in the last 10 days have been about between 10 to 20 for a population of 70 million. So that boils down to about 1 per 5 million per day. So clearly you have to focus on health workers, you have to focus on older people, you have to focus on vulnerable groups, but a mass strategy is pointless and a herd immunity strategy would work very well. I also agree with Dr. Paul in focusing on mRNA apart from infective, the classical sort of Bharat Biotech kind of route, because mRNA vaccines or DNA vaccines would allow you to leapfrog to the next generation of technologies where you can make single protein expressions. And I think this is an inflection point that we should utilize. Okay. Where I would expand on what Dr. Paul said was he talked about the standard routine immunization. I would say that we should also now expand immunization to papilloma viruses, oncogenic cervical cancers, expand the hepatitis vaccination. And this is an opportunity to do that, and we must grab it.
Okay. Interesting. But as far as, Professor Mukherjee, the various rollouts are concerned, with Pfizer appearing to take the lead, is there a need also to be cautious, because one wonders whether one gets into this situation where there's an element of what some call vaccine nationalism, and you also have a lot of large corporations jockeying to be the first. So should we be a little cautious about how we read these announcements that are coming out?
Yes, so I can only talk to you as a data consumer. I don't want to overstep my scientific boundaries.
Sure.
I think we are all watching the clinical trials data with very minutely, with great caution. And the data gives us safety data, and which is only related to symptoms, right? So we do not know whether the vaccine protects against getting the infection or even transmitting the infection. We do not have data on that. And then when you roll it out in real world, it will take a while to get the safety data as well as the effectiveness data, because the clinical trials only are to a selected group of the population, the volunteers. And when you generalize and people are taking it with lots of comorbidities, other medications, we'll still have to see. So I think I have always been a proponent of watching and the data and really trusting the expertise and going through the proper procedures and rigorous examination of the data before being hasty.
Okay. Dr. Paul, I just quickly wanted to get you in on that, because there was that instance of one of the trial volunteers for the Serum Institute trial from Tamil Nadu, as you know, who went to court against them saying adverse effect. The government seemed to find that was not really a problem. But are those sort of red, again, are they red flags of concern, or how would you see that?
Well, remember the relationship of an event which occurs in a volunteer in a trial is taken care of by scientific processes, by experts in an objective manner. There are procedures to it. That an event occurs. It could be coincidental. It may be related to the vaccine. It may be related to something which is not related to the vaccine, but related to the processes, for example.
Right.
So causality assessment is a very scientific process, and there are rules with which you go. So on this, my submission would be that please have trust in the decision taken by the ethics committee and taken by the DCGI. And we should respect our institutions. We should respect the people who form these institutions, because it is not an individual. It is a collection of experts from various other institutions from India, other academic and research institutions. So we should respect that. Now, remember, for every vaccine, or for that matter, any drug, there are potential side effects. Now, you're watching them carefully. That is why even now we are talking about emergency authorization and not a full authorization, because some more follow-up should be done. But we are saying, okay, the benefits seem to be outweighing the adversity. But also remember, there is another two filters of watching this. One, there is a system of adverse events following immunization, which is a system through which we track the adverse events that would occur after people have been given vaccination, children, adults, anybody. AEFAI surveillance is a part and parcel of national immunization program thus far, and eventually always so, for when a new vaccine is introduced. Secondly, there is a post-marketing surveillance that the companies are supposed to conduct, and they would watch as to what happens to the people who receive that drug, or for that matter, a vaccine. So there are these scientific filters which
will follow through.
Which have to be followed through with rigor, and they are there.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Now, Mayur Shetty, as far as now, because so much of this hinges on whether India has a cold chain to pull this off, and Bank of America Securities actually put out some analysis which says that India's cold chain networks, we have a lot of cold chains, but it's quite fragmented. The market is fragmented. It's full of small players. 50% of the cold chain is just concentrated in one state in Uttar Pradesh, which I suspect would be because of agricultural reasons, and 80% is concentrated only in 7 states. You're coming in as a small player, a startup. Is it quite challenging at the moment?
Thank you, Srinivasan. I think all of the focus when we talk about cold chain goes into airplanes and trucks, which account for only about 5% of the vaccine wastage. And at Black Frog, we were tasked by BIRAC, Niti Aayog, and the Government of India to solve the last mile problems of immunization, because it's once the vaccines leave the refrigerators and head out with an ice box, that's when 70 to 80% of the thermal degradation happens. And as a solution to this, we had previously developed a patented technology called Embolio, which is a portable vaccine carrier with rapid cooling to ensure there's strict temperature control and minimize freeze-thaw cycles for vaccines.
Okay.
So on the field, an Anganwadi worker or an ANM, every time she has to immunize somebody, she has to open the device and retrieve the vials and subject these vaccines to suboptimal temperatures. So we are able to stabilize the temperatures back to safe limits over 96% faster than a passively cooled system.
Right.
And these freeze-thaw cycles are very detrimental to vaccines, and that's what causes the degradation.
Okay.
So the value that we are trying to bring in, apart from the other players with cold chain management itself, is that the relevant aspect here is that we're providing a distinct advantage of having a battery-powered source at the point of administering of vaccines.
Okay.
So you know exactly where the vaccines are going, what's the condition of these vaccines, and it can be onboarded onto the Government of India's existing programs. They have a very successful EVIN program, and now it's a CoWIN portal as well.
Okay.
So who is getting the vaccines? Who is left out? What are the hotspot areas? This data and an informed operation is the only way to optimize vaccine delivery.
That sounds great. Mayur, it's just that, I mean, you're doing it with your outfit, but the question is of scale. And Professor Krishna, we have very little time, but do you share Dr. Paul's confidence that we have the ability to scale up to the extent where we can deliver millions of doses of the corona vaccine while also continuing our ongoing immunization program?
Absolutely. I'm totally, as I said, I agree with Dr. Paul. And I think if we put our minds to it and we don't sort of take huge big bang decisions, but think it through, we can do it well. But I'd just like to qualify one point that Dr. Paul made. He sort of, in passing, referred to efficacy. Remember that efficacy of vaccine trials right now is actually done under very selected conditions. If you look at the Pfizer trial, they have a certain category of patients. They look at symptoms. If you look at the AZ trial, they look at younger people. So it's very important that when we move to the next phase, we look at trial data in our country and typically what's called phase 4, which is when you actually roll out. We should, Dr. Paul mentioned herd immunity. We should actually bring in mathematicians and others to actually calculate herd immunity and build good models.
Okay.
And of course, with the physical infrastructure that I just heard, I'm pretty confident that we can do a good job if we think it through.
Okay. Well, fingers crossed that it all goes to plan. But Dr. Paul, you appear confident and optimistic, and that's good. Let's hope that we manage to meet those targets that you spoke about. But anyway, we will continue to track this. Pleasure having all of you on the show tonight. That's all the time we have on Reality Check. Completely out of time. Thanks for watching. Good night.